This is Kenny Tan. Welcome to Real Estate License in 14 Weeks. This is episode 31 of Starting from Zero. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 9. If you like my video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell for future notification, and share this video with your friend. What is the definition of an agent? An agent is a person who is authorized by the principal in business dealings with third persons. How is agency created? An agency can be created by one of three ways. One by agreement, the other one by Estoppel, and lastly, the third one is by ratification. For exam purposes, all you need to remember is agency can be created by mutual agreement, Estoppel, and ratification. You don't even have to apply these principles to any fact scenario, but let me explain to you, just for your own benefit, how agency can be created by Estoppel. And here is an example or scenario. If you put out an advertisement, let's say there are 40 agents who advertise together with you. So you're making representation to the general public that these are your agents. However, of the 40 people that are on that advertisement, one of them is truly not your agent. For whatever reason, you just wanted his picture there. Well, the unfortunate thing is, by making representation to the general public that this person is an agent when in fact he's not, you may be suffering a consequence later on. Is a consumer is defrauded by the non-agent who appears on the ad because you cannot go back on your words. And that's what we call Estoppel. By making representation to the general public that he's an agent when he's not, you cannot later on deny that he's an agent. And that's the principle of Estoppel. Ratification. Okay, I'll give you an example of ratification. Let's say, for example, you're a real estate agent, you found a buyer, you open an escrow, and during the pending escrow, you decided to switch broker. And let's say when the escrow was open, you were with broker A, and then during the pending escrow, you switched to broker B. But the thing is, who is going to take over? Which broker? Broker A or broker B? Well, in order for broker B to take over the escrow, by taking over means that the broker B would have to supervise the salesperson, because a salesperson can only be under one broker and not two. So since salesperson left broker A, now is with broker B, the problem is that salesperson may have done certain things under the supervision of broker A, but now it's under broker B. So what broker B can do is that broker B can negotiate with broker A to decide who's going to be totally responsible for the transaction, who's going to take over the responsibility. Now, if broker B decides to take over the responsibility, and then broker B and A can negotiate a commission split between them, but broker B, by taking over the escrow, broker B would have to ratify all the actions by the salesperson. Ratify means that even though the salesperson was not under the supervision of broker B before she switched broker, but broker B admits or is willing to accept all the activities by salesperson while she was under the supervision of broker A. That's what we call ratification. Next, duties of an agent toward the principal. Number one, an agent cannot use confidential relationship with the principal for his own benefit, such as in the example of a secret profit. If you remember secret profit, the example I gave you, an agent cannot make use of that trust. An agent cannot make use of that position of trust and confidence to take advantage of the principal. So if an agent receives secret profit, an agent will be violating that relationship. Next, an agent must use reasonable care and skill in serving his principal. So if an agent is negligent in conducting the agent's activities as an agent for the principal, an agent will be liable to the principal. An agent must also disclose all material facts to the principal. For example, if a buyer is a corporation owned by the agent, an agent has an interest in that corporation, that would be a material fact to the seller if the agent also represents the seller. So that is a fact, a material fact that must be disclosed to the seller. If the agent failed to disclose that, that will be violation of an agent's duty to the principal. And agents must obey the instructions of the principal. So if a principal, for example, a seller asked the agent or instructed the agent not to put the property on the MLS, and if the agent goes ahead and put the property on the MLS, that will be violation of the duty to obey the principal. Next, an agent must render an accounting to the principal on demand. An example would be that if an agent is managing properties for an owner, and the owner say, I want to see the statement. I want you to give me a statement of all the receipts and expenditures. Upon that demand, an agent must account, an agent must provide the information to the landlord. Lastly, before an agent can act for two principals who are negotiating with each other, an agent must get the consent of both principals. An agent's liability toward third persons. Third person means that agent doesn't work for this person or doesn't represent this person. Well, with respect to third persons, an agent has two responsibilities. An agent must not cause injury or harm to the person or property of the third person. An example would be, let's say you're an agent, you take a buyer to go see a vacant property, and you use your Supra key to get into the property, and before you left, you forgot to close the door or lock the door. Well, because of your negligence, the owner lost some valuables when a burglary happened. Somebody entered the house, took the valuable things from the house because you were negligent. So that's one of the duties you owe to third person. Second duty that you owe to third person is called the duty of not committing negligent or intentional misrepresentation. Let's say, for example, you are a listing agent, you represent a seller. Now, with respect to the buyer and the buyer's agent, with respect to the buyer is not your customer because you only represent the seller. So the buyer will be a third person. Now, with respect to the buyer, you're not supposed to intentionally say something that is not true about the house to the buyer. Or you're not supposed to say something in making representation to the buyer. You're supposed to make sure the information is true and accurate. So you're supposed to check the information before you convey it to the buyer, or else you might be committing negligent misrepresentation. And that is a duty that you owe to the buyer not to commit. Now let's talk about the rights of agents against principal. The only right that an agent has against principal has to do with the commission. So if an agent brings in a ready, willing, and able buyer to the principal, open escrow, and then just before the escrow want to close, let's say the seller say, I don't want to sell anymore. And the seller has no excuse, no justification for not selling. And in that case, the agent may have a claim for his commission against the seller. Now, if you sign a listing agreement with a seller for $1 million, so in other words, the seller agreed to let you sell it for $1 million. So today you sign the contract, tomorrow you bring a buyer who's paying cash on the property for $1 million. At that point, must the seller accept the $1 million offer, or the seller can still reject it? Under the old law, the seller would be required to accept the $1 million offer, or he owes you a commission. But the law was changed in 2010. The seller is no longer required to accept that $1 million offer, even if the listing agreement states that the listing price is $1 million. For exam purposes, should you follow the old law or new law? I would recommend that for exam purposes, just follow the new law. Next, let's talk about termination of an agency. Agency can be terminated by one of several ways. Number one, it can be by mutual agreement. It is very common in the industry that sometimes an agent and the seller doesn't get along after the listing is signed. And in that case, they might make the wise decision of canceling or terminating the agency by agreement. The second way to terminate an agency is called renouncement by an agent. And the renouncement is basically just an expression by the agent of his or her desire not to work for the seller anymore. The third way to terminate an agency is by revocation by the principal. In other words, sometimes a seller is not very happy with the agent's performance. A seller decided that he or she doesn't want this agent to work for him anymore. We call that revocation. In other words, he changes his mind about hiring this agent. Revocation. The next way to terminate an agency is when there is an extinction of the subject. What is an extinction of the subject? Let's say, for example, the house that you are listing the property for burned down. In other words, there's no longer a house. That's called an extinction of a subject. So in that case, the agency is also terminated. The next way to terminate an agency is through the expiration of the listing. So if you sign a 4-month listing at the end of the 4th month and you still have not gotten the home sold, and the owner does not want to extend or renew the listing, so by the expiration of the listing agreement, the agency relationship is terminated. Lastly, agency relationship can also be terminated when either the principal or the agent has died. This is the end of episode 31. See you next time.